Hello friends, today we are going to wrap up my 2022 reading year. So we're just going to casually sit here on my couch. I have Goodreads and the story graph pulled up, and we're just gonna go through some stats, and I'll put some pictures up on the screen, really just to take a look back. I feel like it'll be fun to have this in a year or two to be able to look back on what I was doing and reading in 2022. And it'll also be interesting to revisit this next year to see if my 2023 reading was any different or the same. So in 2022, I did read 136 books. Holy crap. I can't believe I read that much. I've always wanted to read 100 books and I've never made it there. So that is phenomenal. And the number of pages I read, I think, if I did my math correctly, is 44,340. And so I imported all of my stuff to the story graph, but I don't think everything came over in the same way or the same versions. So there might be some discrepancies here in some of these, but I digress. So let's talk about the moods of the books that I read. So my largest mood by far was dark, followed by mysterious, tense, emotional, and reflective. So that sounds about right. There was also a little bit of sad, hopeful, funny, lighthearted, informative, challenging, inspiring, and adventurous thrown in there. Let's talk about the pace of the books that I read. So most of what I read was medium pace, which sounds about right. And so that was 48% medium paced, 43% fast paced, so just a little bit less, and then 9% slow paced. And when I looked through some of those, I was kind of surprised what the story graph considers to be slow paced, because the story graph said that Keeping Lucy was slow paced, and it absolutely was not. I also didn't feel like Cruel Beautiful World was slow paced. I felt like that was medium paced. I agree with A Slow Fire Burning. That one is so slow paced. And I agree with The Memory Keeper's Daughter. And I agree with Born for Love because that's a nonfiction book. So I'm not sure why that one gets a pace because it's like a psychology book. Anyways, page number. So the majority of the books that I read were between 300 and 500 pages, which checks out. That was about 75%. 22% of the books I read were less than 300 pages, and then 4 books were over 500 pages, so 3%. And those books were Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter, Outlander, 11/22/63, and What She Knew by Gilly Macmillan. All right, let's talk about fiction versus nonfiction. So 88% was fiction, and 12% was nonfiction. So I read 15 nonfiction books. And honestly, I wish that number was higher. Like, I love nonfiction books and I love memoirs and psychology and self-help. So that is something that I will need to work on in 2023 is more nonfiction. All right, and let's look at the genres. No surprise, but my highest read genre is thrillers. I read 72 that were considered thrillers, 44 that were considered mystery, and then 22 were considered contemporary. Historical, only 14 of them were considered historical, but when I looked through that list on the story graph, there were definitely other historical fictions that I read that weren't listed there. So I don't know what the story graph is doing. I'm still trying to figure out the story graph. One thing that I thought was interesting is one was listed as a graphic novel, which I don't do graphic novels, but when I looked, it was Mother Noise, and the woman who wrote that memoir, she wrote her own little comic strip in one part of the book, and I think that's what they're considering to be a graphic novel, but I don't know that that really counts. And then I did have one that was considered dystopian, and that was Blue Ticket by Sophie McIntosh, so no surprise there. Unfortunately, I did not like that book. And then I read 2 that were considered LGBTQIA+. I read 3 that were considered fantasy, and that kind of surprised me, but then when I look at them, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Outlander, Damned by Chuck Palahniuk, and 11/22/63 by Stephen King. So that's about as fantasy as my reading ever gets. So that kind of checks out. My most read authors, this was interesting. So I read 6 Colleen Hoover books. 6. But when I went back and looked in February, I was doing a team challenge and I had to read a bunch of romance books that fit prompts, and I was looking for like really short books that just barely met like the 150 page limit or whatever for that challenge. So I did read a couple of her like short stories and things like that. Lucinda Berry, I read 5 Lucinda Berry books this year, which makes sense because I was trying to read all of her backlist so that I could do a video. So I did a video ranking all of her published books. So that one does make sense. Diane Chamberlain, I read 3, and I read 1 more already this year, and I have another one on my shelf. Diane Chamberlain is quickly becoming a favorite author for me. Stephen King, I read 3. I wish that number was a little bit higher because I do have quite a bit of unread Stephen King on my shelf, but we'll work on that for this year. 3 Kirsten Moglin, which I don't think is going to continue into 2023. 3 JP Delaney, which I also don't think is going to continue into 2023. So my average rating was a whopping 3.17. So I had about 13 5 stars, about 30 4 stars, about 50 or so 3 stars, about 20 2 stars, a little bit over 20, and about 7 1-star books. So my average rating is 3.17, which I feel like is kind of low when I look at most people's average ratings. I was talking to my friend Jackie about this. I rate books the way I want to. I rate books based on how they make me feel, based on what I read in the synopsis and how the synopsis actually had, what the synopsis had to do with the book, because sometimes I read synopsis and they have nothing to do with the actual book, like Comfort Me with Apples. Anyway, so I don't feel bad for giving a book 1 star because I know that for as many books as I give 1 star, those books are getting so many 5 stars from other people, and that is the great thing about books. I also know that there are books that I have given 5 stars that other people absolutely hate and have given 1 star. So I rate books the way I feel and the way I see fit. And I don't feel bad about it because I know that there is a book out there for everybody. And there's a book that somebody's gonna give 5 stars and somebody's gonna give 1 star. So the longest book that I read was Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. That one comes in at a whopping 864 pages. And then the shortest book that I read was Once Solved by Blake Pierce. And I believe I read that one for maybe the Losers Club readathon. But my average length was 343 pages, which makes sense. So as far as average ratings per month, my lowest rated month was June. I only had an average rating of 2.77 in June, and in December, my average rating was 4 stars. So that was my best. But December was also the month that I read the least amount of books, and they were mainly all book of the month. So I don't know what that says. I read the most books in February. I think I read 17 in February, and that was a total of 5,332 pages. My most shelved book that I read was It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, and my least shelved book was also my shortest one. It was Once Solved. My highest rated book that I read is no surprise, and it was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. It has an average rating of 4.63 stars, and I rated it 5 stars, so it makes sense. So reading challenges. So I participated in quite a few reading challenges with my Facebook book club in 2022. That definitely helped with my reading. I also did a couple of readathons. So I co-hosted Thrill Till Halloween, which is a weekend readathon that my friend Jackie developed. I also vlogged and participated in the Upside Down readathon and the Losers Club readathon. And so I definitely enjoyed readathons and reading challenges this year, and that is something that will continue into 2023 as well. Okay, those are all of the stats that we're going to talk about today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for coming with me on this journey the past 9 months or so and listen to me talk about books. I'm so excited to see where my channel goes in 2023. I already have so many fun plans lined up. I was looking at my calendar the other day and just thinking like, oh my gosh, I have so many fun things coming up that I just can't wait to share with you. But thank you so much for watching. Please hit that subscribe button. It really helps out my channel, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.